Next up, we got the Golden State Warriors. So they lost last night against the Hawks. They're on a really rough stretch right now with mainly with all the injuries, obviously. But um, the biggest thing we need to talk about, obviously, is Porzingis. That whole trade with Kaminga, and then really if Steph should even bother coming back this year. Give me your thoughts on the whole. First, we'll talk about the Porzingis
Well,
trade, though.
he left the game a couple nights ago in Detroit with back spasms. That obviously was a concern when they picked him up. Um, and he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So I think we'll wait to see the severity of that injury. But if they can bring him back, I think they have to bring him back. And you got to see him play with Steph to know what you have going into next year, and to try to make your strongest possible case to him as this is where you want to be going forward. Whether or not that's feasible given their health remains to be seen, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think with the Porzingis trade when it happened at the time, I like him as a player. I think he fits what Steve Kerr and this team are good at, what they like to do. I think the fit is there. I think the biggest thing with Porzingis though is health. I mean, he just has not been able to stay healthy these
Mm-hmm.
last few years, and as he gets older, I can't imagine that's going to get better. And I think this team and Dunleavy has to ask themselves: does half of half a season of Porzingis get this team to being a top playoff team and a contender? And I really don't see it because I think that's where you really have to. I think the days of expecting 65 plus games out of Porzingis is not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kaminga, I totally understand that you had to trade him at this point. It just that relationship was going nowhere and was getting worse as time went on. So um, I think the trade itself, the Warriors had to do what they had to do. Um, but I do think with Steph though and this team, I don't outside of him playing with Porzingis, I don't see a positive reason to bring him back this year.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about Steph?
I mean, just to make the counterpoint, he's 38,
Yeah, he just turned 38.
just turned 38.
Yeah,
Um, and I heard Steve Kerr make this point on 95.7 the other day, but they're paid to compete,
yeah,
and Steph's not getting any younger. So granted, as fans we might think they have no chance, but they got to play out the rest of the season. It's too late to tank. It's too late to be concerned about
that's
draft
true.
position. So you just try to get to that play in. You try to win two games, and then see whether or not they can contend in a series. I think it's unlikely, but I think you don't know how many more years you got with Steph, so you got to take every chance that you have.
Yeah, because I mean, they're not getting out of the 9-10 spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would make it that if they do win the play in and they make the playoffs, they're the eighth seed. And unless San Antonio somehow jumps OKC, which I don't see happening, you're more than likely going to end up playing OKC. Which I mean, I love Steph. Steph's unbelievable, but the team around him, I don't think can compete with OKC. And I think this starts from a bigger issue with the Warriors. I think the Warriors a few years ago were in such a great spot coming off a championship, having a good young core that you can extend this dynasty really. And as Steph and Draymond age out, you had a young core that you could bring in, and it just hasn't worked out. I mean, you look at everything that happened with Wiseman. You look at everything that happened with Kaminga. Poole was really the only one that you saw take a step year in and year out. Then the whole situation when Draymond happens, you trade him, um, and it seems like these last couple of years they've just trying to make something work with the Chris Paul trade didn't help. Jimmy Butler did end up helping. Unfortunately, obviously, he got injured this year. I'm not going to fault the Warriors for that. And then this whole Porzingis trade. It just seems like every year they're just trying to make a trade and fix it while the year's going on, and um, it hasn't worked. And now you put yourself in a position where your best player's 38 years old. You don't have a second option right now. Jimmy Butler's not going to be back until well into next year. When he does come back, what's his how is he going to be? He's 36 years old, going to be 37. How is he going to be the Jimmy Butler that we're used to? You have Porzingis, that question mark on whether to bring him back. Draymond's getting older. Yeah, if you are seriously wanting to compete and give Steph the best chance at winning a fifth title, you have to find a way to get a superstar to come. And I don't think outside of that, I don't think there's any opportunity for this team to win if they don't do that.
Do you expect them to be super aggressive on that front this offseason?
I mean, I expect them to be aggressive. Last offseason, they didn't do anything until the very end. I Horford was an okay signing, but again, to me, it doesn't move the needle. I think this offseason, I think the thought of getting Giannis sounds great, but at the end of the day, this team doesn't really have any assets to give up. I think the strongest assets they do have are first round picks in the future where Steph's not here, and you're relying on that Warriors team to be bad. As far as the players on the roster now, I don't think you have anyone that and anyone who's is in the market to trade a superstar. I don't think wants those assets. I think Pajemski, Moody, all these guys are fine players, but they don't they don't they're not attracting any GMs to make a trade for their superstar in order to acquire those guys. It's all going to be trade or first round picks, which so far the Warriors have been reluctant to give those up.
Hmm.
And so I I would say no, but I mean that's just my opinion. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think a package of Brandon Pajemski and Will Richard, and whatever other young players that they can cobble together is going to be too attractive. And you probably got to include Jimmy Butler for the salaries to match.
Right.
And like you mentioned, what's he going to look like next year? At his age, coming off injury. And then if those picks are your main assets, you trade those, and if that doesn't work out, then we're looking at an even bleaker, post Steph future for the Warriors. But I do think there's no getting around the fact that when Steph is done, it's going to be some dark years for the
Well,
team.
absolutely, and I think that's I don't think they'll ever say this, but I do think that's why they are reluctant to trade those picks because right when Butler went down, I don't. I think they were heading in a bad direction, but right when Butler went down, I think that just confirmed it. I mean, I like you said, I don't see a way around this right now. You have Jimmy Butler, who's again just tore his ACL. He's going to be 37. Who knows at the level he's going to be playing at? I think that was probably your only trade piece that you could have used. But the way I look at it too is if a team's trading, let's take the Giannis situation for example. If Milwaukee's trading Giannis, they have made the decision they are rebuilding.
Hmm.
A rebuilding team is not going to want to acquire Jimmy Butler. The only reason they would is to hopefully package him into a separate trade to acquire more future assets. Jimmy Butler's not going to a team that's not in a win now situation. And so I think that's what made it hard. And then now that he's injured, now again, I don't see anyone wanting to take a chance on him for $60 million. So again, to me, the only way out of this to give Steph that opportunity is to mortgage your future and mortgage it for a long time because the
Yeah,
price to get a game changing player like a Giannis, one of those top tier guys that's going to make a difference, is going to require years and years of assets. And I think, again, I don't think they would ever admit this, but I don't think they're looking at this in. I don't think they feel it's worth to give Steph 1 or 2 more years of championship expectations in order to do that.
yeah,
So I I don't see it happening again. I hope it happens, but I don't see them making a marquee trade right now. I think bringing Porzingis back, I think it does help you a little bit, but again, he's gonna be injured a lot of the season. At least that's what the few or the recent years have showed. So,
yeah.
um, does a team of Steph Curry going into his 39-year-old season, Draymond, Porzingis, and Jimmy Butler coming off an ACL? To me, that's just again another 9 seed, 8 seed playing team. To me, I don't see it a realistic opportunity to win a playoff series or win it, let alone win a championship at that point.
Hmm.
Um, I want to go back real quick to well, I mean, we talked about the roster and decisions they have to make, but the 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 man in charge, Steve Kerr. How have you assessed this year, these last couple of years as a whole with Steve Kerr? Do you think Steve Kerr should be coming back? Do you think they should? I mean, his contract's coming up. Do you think they should bring him back? Do you think they should look to maybe get a new voice in the locker room? What do you think on that?
I mean, I think given the relationship he has with Steph and with Draymond, he'll be back
Yeah,
as long as he wants to be back. I think he's probably earned that right. But I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the player development struggles that they've had with Kaminga, that relationship deteriorating to past the point of no concern,
yeah,
no return, and James Wiseman not panning out, and just that whole um, second timeline not panning out. Some of that has got to be on the player evaluation and the draft decisions that they've made.
yeah,
But some of that blame does have to go to Kerr, and I think Kerr, um, hasn't really shown an ability to develop young talent. I think he's good at managing egos, and he's good at managing a contending team. But I don't think he's been able to thread that needle of developing players to kind of come up and gradually take the mantle from Steph, which was going to be a tall order to
for
begin
sure,
with. But
100%.
I think he'll be back. I think he'll probably be back until Steph's done. But I definitely don't think he is the guy to lead them into the next
The
era.
next era of
And
team,
I don't
yeah,
think that's really the job that he wants either.
of 100%. And I don't think he wants that. I don't think he wants that either. I think with Steve Kerr, from my opinion, is I think the way Steph plays is it's such a unique style, and so obviously you're going to build a offense around what he does, which is so unique compared to a lot of the other stars in this league. But with Steve Curry, it's one of those things where when players don't fit that style, I don't. I feel like the last few years he hasn't been able to
Be flexible.
to be flexible at all. I
Mm-hmm.
think like you look at Kaminga, you could throw Wiseman in there. I think there are a lot of guys that if they don't match that style and they don't play well into that style, there's very little wiggle room there. And there's certain guys that I think he really latches onto that he gives too much leeway to some of these guys. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that um, I don't know. I feel like that has been a big issue with. Again, I think that affects your development of players. I think you look at Kaminga and his development over the first 4.5 years with the team, and each year it's been a problem getting him to a different level. And Steve Kerr, I think, had this idea of what he wanted Kaminga to be,
Yeah.
and that didn't fit in line with what Kaminga wanted. I think the same you could say for Poole too. Obviously, what happened with Poole played a huge factor too, but uh, I think that was also going in that direction as well. I think Steve Kerr bringing in guys like or wanting to bring in guys like a Chris Paul and Al Horford. These guys, I think the game similar to Steve Kerr, but Chris Paul is 39 years old when you bring him in. Al Horford's 39. Like you need to infuse young talent into this roster, especially if you want to be successful. And I think that's where the issue lies with Steve Kerr. Is I think he is best suited, like you said, for a win now team, a contending team with a bunch of veterans, which outside of Draymond and Steph and Horford, this
Mm-hmm.
team really doesn't have that. And I think you see a lot of those uh, problems arise when with Steve Kerr. And I
Yeah.
think, like you said, I don't see him leaving. I don't see them getting rid of him because of the success he's had. But I do think that that year that Steph does decide to hang it up, I think will probably be the time Steve Kerr does do, and I think it should be. I don't think Steve Kerr should be the guy to
Yeah.
try to turn this thing around and go into a rebuild because that's where this team ultimately is heading in the next couple of years.
Yeah. I
Um,
agree.
so, in your opinion, you think Steph should come back for if he is healthy? Assuming obviously you don't want to rush him, but do you think it's worth having him come back and finish out the year and try to make the play in and try to get into the playoffs and try to
I think so.
compete.
I think so. I mean, I don't have super high expectations for them, making any kind of run. I don't think they're championship contenders, of course, but we don't know how many years we got left with Steph, and if he's healthy enough to, try to win a couple play-in games and get into the playoffs, I want to see it as a fan.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
No, I agree. I think I well I think it's probably best to hold him out
Just to
personally.
avoid injury or to,
Avoid serious injury. I don't think this team's going anywhere even with Steph. I think this year has just been riddled with injuries.
mhm.
And I think this team needs to just reset itself for next year. But I do think the biggest thing too is Dunleavy needs to make a decision on what he wants to do. I think he's been trying to balance the two, and I don't think you can. I think
Mhm.
you need to either just embrace this is the end of Steph's career. Let's push all the chips in the middle of the table
Yeah.
and give him a realistic shot, or be realistic and say there's nothing that we feel like we can do to do that,
Mhm.
and let's just roll with what we have, and let's try to acquire some assets for the future. Again, I think you have to go one direction or the other. I don't think you can try to stay in the middle. I think you have to choose, and I hope he does come to a realization soon. So we'll see what happens this offseason. I think this offseason is going to be huge on what the future holds for this team.